I'm going to call this meeting of the Williston Selectboard to order. We are going to take a brief public comment, and then we're going to enter executive session. So, self, please.
Thank you. I appreciate you accommodating me. My name is Mary Houle, and I am from Richmond. But I bring to you an issue that is exclusively Williston. Does Williston have the 1% override on taxes so that whatever non-clothing is non-food items sold, the town gets 1%?
The local option sales tax, yes.
Thank you. So that means this is more concerning to folks that govern the town. The two specific items I bring before you are, one is Shaw's, the local grocery store over here, well, not local, sorry, and Greer's Laundromat. I'll attack Greer's Laundromat briefly first. Now, I use a laundromat on a regular basis, and Williston is where I come to for that service. The Greer's over here across from the Oasis Day Spa in the corner where the Chef's Corner is. And again, this might not mean anything to you unless you have to frequent a laundromat. So that's why it's a big concern of mine. They have a lot of machines in there. The ones that I use are the $3.50 a load machines. They have 8 of those. One of them is working at this time. 3 weeks ago when I was in that same place, 2 of them were working. So right now, 7 of the smaller load machines are out of order. Exactly one was working. I don't know who to complain to. There's no telephone number on the door for somebody to meet with me or talk about maybe they'd like to take my laundry home to do it, and I'd gladly pay them $3.50 for that if their machines are working. So I don't know where to go or where to take that complaint to. Again, there's no phone number on the door, so I don't know how to get in touch with them. I do know that it opens at a specific time and it closes at a specific time. Number 2, if you will, is Shaw's. In February of this year, I sent a certified letter to their corporate office complaining about some things that I have a degree in human resources, so I know a lot of things are mandated by corporate that are instituted by the local stores, local, if you will, the Williston store. And I got no response. So in about May or June, I called to make an appointment with Jamie Bashaw. He's the store director. I guess that's a fancy way of saying he's the store manager. And I explained the issue that I had with them. And between sending the certified letter with no response and meeting with Jamie, I spent 1 hour and 57 minutes on hold for the corporate office. I still have that in my phone. And I showed it to Jamie, and he said, well, you shouldn't have to do that. So since the meeting that I've had with Jamie, again, this is the local store manager, I have had no response. Outside of contacting the corporate office, which I got on the website, and calling the corporate headquarters, which turns out to be somewhere across the sea, because the second time I called, it was not a United States-based company that was doing the outsourced calls. So what would you recommend that I do? There's no phone. I've called the phone number that was listed on the website. I've written a certified letter, which I thought would get somebody's attention. If I get a certified letter, and even in the office here, I'm sure somebody pays strict attention to it. So what would you recommend I do? Any suggestion would be appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, so as a select board, we do not have any control over the local businesses and how they operate. My best suggestion would be to, if you have concerns about how they're operating, you could contact the Better Business Bureau. In terms of finding a number for Greer's online, I don't know what the phone number is online, but as a governing body, we don't have any control over how individual businesses within town are run unless they are breaking, zoning violations
Sure.
or things like that.
Sure, I understand that. I understand that there's nothing you can do, but this is a concern that, again, if you use a laundromat, the laundromat issue is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And if you shop for groceries, that too is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have horrible concerns for Shaw's. It would have been, oh, this lady from Vermont's calling, isn't that a novelty? We'll write her a letter. And that's what I said. I said, I do expect a response. I have not received one yet. Mm-hmm. Just as an aside, I think it's very unfortunate that, I don't know, are we in general being taken advantage of because there's nothing local people can do or local officials can do? So I thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you rearranging the schedule. Good night.
Thank you for coming in. Just a
Thank you.
good reason why we support local businesses.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. We do have an executive session on the agenda. Is there a motion?
So I move to find that premature public knowledge regarding confidential attorney-client legal communications in a labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage. And further, move that we enter into executive session to discuss confidential attorney-client communications to provide professional legal services in a labor relations agreement with employees under Title I, Sections 313A, 1B, and F of the Vermont statutes, and invite Town Attorney Bariah Smith and Planning Director Matt Belanger to join the discussion regarding confidential attorney-client legal communications, and Fire Chief Aaron Collette to join the discussion regarding a labor relations agreement with employees, and Town Manager Eric Wells to join both discussions.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are in executive session. For those watching, okay. So we are out of executive session, and our first order of business will be to review the minutes from October 1st, 2024.
So I move approval of the minutes of October 1st, 2024 with any necessary modifications.
Second.
All right. So let's, page 1.
I think Eric is looking for seeing some feedback on the minutes, not that they're incorrect, but I don't think we need to include the resolutions in the minutes. They're public documents.
That's page 1 and page 2.
Our first meeting with our new recordings. Yeah, see what the board would like to do.
Yeah.
So any other notes on page 1? Page 2? Page 3?
I think there's just a small typo in number 9 on the first line. It says, Mr. Plum said that the only proposed change for the year is they extend, I think, to extend the agreement.
And page 4?
I got a typo in the on number 11 at the last line. Select Board decided not pursue. It should be scratch the second not. And I think it's been customary to put in the time that we adjourned.
All right. Any other notes? Just want to welcome Darby. We are glad to have them doing our minutes for us. So all those in favor of approving the minutes with the noted modifications?
Aye.
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 Okay. Approved. The next portion would be a second round of public comment. We did a brief one earlier. Is there any folks here who wish to make a public comment? It can be on something that's coming up or something entirely unrelated to our agenda. Anybody online?
Nope, no one online.
Okay, well, then we will move on to the Catamount Community Forest Trail Plan. And I think we have John Atkinson and Andrew Plum here. Yep, awesome.
Some other board members here from Outdoor Families.
Excellent. If you'll just introduce yourself for the record.
I'm John Atkinson,
Yep.
Executive Director of the Catamount Outdoor Family Center.
And Andrew Plum, Town Conservation Planner.
Great, thank you. Did you want to introduce, or do you want to right to you all?
I'll let Andrew
Okay,
take it from here.
great.
Yes, I'll just provide a brief introduction. This is a discussion about the comprehensive trail plan that the Catamount Outdoor Family Center has prepared. This is the basis for project permitting. I'll let John go into that. But I'll just briefly summarize the Catamount Community Forest Committee reviewed and the project and recommended that the Select Board approve the trail plan and allow Eric to sign permit applications and allow the Family Center to proceed with permitting for the project. The committee discussed the proposed changes to the trails, and also the public outreach was a main point of discussion. The Vermont Land Trust also participated in that discussion, and they are also required to approve the trail plan, along with the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, both easement holders on the property. Vermont Land Trust participated in one of the meetings, and they did a review of the plan as well. There are some small changes that they requested surrounding some wetlands, and it's the vernal pool on the property as well. Basically, from that discussion, the Family Center released some additional survey materials to basically engage the public a bit more for the committee, and did some website information, and yeah, and so I'll leave it to John to summarize the project and answer any questions. I'm also happy to answer questions if you have them for me. Thank you.
Could I borrow your sheet?
Of course.
Thank you for having us here tonight. I really appreciate your time. We have, just to give you guys a background on how we got to where we are today, we were reviewing the work that we wanted to do on the trails and reached out to the state because we realized that we needed to do permits for any work that we wanted to do. We initially engaged with our local wetlands specialist, and Tina Heath, you may know her. She encouraged us to do one small permit and then do a comprehensive one. We started doing that small permit and realized that really the overall plan was a better choice. They did not want us to do piecemeal plans for the next 20 years, so we approached it from a larger perspective, and for the last year and a half or so, we've been engaging the community and working on our own planning on the ground. And since that time, we've reached out to the community twice for public feedback. We've held public meetings, and then now that we have this plan, we've also shared that with the public and gotten feedback on that. We are excited that the Land Trust and the Catamount Community Forest Committee have given their stamp of approval. Generally, the Land Trust still has to give final approval, and we have some small changes to make. But we approach this from a perspective of trying to get Act 250 wetlands and stream bank alteration permits, and we had several goals that we tried to work under. Those were primarily to address trail network climate resiliency and sustainability, to ensure the Catamount Outdoor Family Center's financial stability in a changing climate, and with competition around us that is free to access. We wanted to increase trail accessibility. As a general rule, on public land, we believe that people should be included. We wanted to make the trails more usable in all seasons, making them more resilient, especially as we have climate change. We wanted to reduce overall impacts and maintenance on the land itself and on ourselves. We wanted to upgrade connectivity and improve navigation and improve enjoyment through trail reroutes and other changes to the network to make it make more sense. We also wanted to make sure that we had a lookout going forward, and that we were securing an easement for trail access across private land that is still unprotected. And we were also looking to reclaim part of the wetting field that is currently overgrown, and then replace or close sections of trail that were not appropriate for several reasons. Either they were too steep, too tight, overly impactful, redundant, confusing, unsafe, or off of Catamount Community Forest property. We have addressed wetlands and wet areas and water crossings, and are continuing to do that with our local wetlands person. And we have a plan to replace pieces of trail that don't make the most sense, and we'll close pieces that are in that bucket. And then finally, we have a plan for phasing all of this work. This is not something that will happen in a short period of time. This is phased over 10 to 15 years. And I can address how we decided those phases. Those can also change, but that's the project in a nutshell. And I'd love to answer any questions that anybody has, and there we go.
Any questions from the board?
Did you say something about the Vermont Land Trust and the Vermont Housing Board?
They hold an easement on the land, and we have to go through them also to get their permission to do this.
The Vermont Housing Board?
Housing and Conservation Board, yes. They commonly hold easements on other property in Vermont with the land trust, based on the funding structure of how the land is concerned.
And because it's totally confusing people that I'm not torturing John with 57 questions.
I know, well,
I sit on the committee, I've already tortured him with 57 questions.
I don't feel tortured.
I pre-tortured the whole team. They really were wishing Mike Isham was back on that board. No, I mean, I think one of the things that, I will comment instead of questions, if that's okay. That as a forest committee, I at least struggle with a little bit, is like, I mean, you can look at these maps, right? I am not a trail planner. I cannot I can barely figure out which way is north and south on some of these plans. So really my questions were around, I would say more policy level, right? So the right people worked on these trails, you know, they are trail experts. It's a comprehensive plan. They had a list of goals that they worked up with the people who were users and anybody else who wanted to participate. So they've worked up a set of goals, and then the execution or the plan follows those goals. Yeah. So they did reach out. We spent a lot of time and actually sent John back to do a little bit more community outreach, just to make sure that it wasn't just the people on their email list, but everybody had an opportunity. So they've had sort of extensive period of time to make sure that people who wanted to weigh in had the opportunity to engage with the project. So, you know, with all that said, I think they've done their due diligence. They've pulled in the right people. They've asked the right questions, and they've come up with a really solid, comprehensive plan. So, I supported it from the committee. I'll support it from here.
I had two very minor things, and maybe Andrew can talk up this on the document that you have. It says trail standards. It talks about the town of Whistler. Is that correct? Not Williston?
Town of Whistler, yeah. The town of Whistler has built trail standards that.
And what state, Colorado or?
I know, British Columbia.
Oh, okay. And the last one I had is on the last page, and it just talks about to keep current lookout spot the TOW. I presume that's town of Williston.
Yes,
It'd probably be a good idea to spell that out.
sure.
Other than not having.
Terry, you flipped that over. I thought you were going to say like this white line right here. Problem with this white line right
I'm
here.
not good with maps either.
I mean, a little facetious. They do actually. I laugh at the maps, but they do have a really good trail explanation of the changes that they want in words that are easier to follow for those of us who are map challenged. But you know, it's several pages of good descriptions of what the plan is.
Yeah.
And it's, John, you and I talked about this a little bit. It's not there will be amendments. How did you put that?
Well, you know, we have to go through a process, Act 250 and wetlands permits, that's gonna change a little bit, you know, if not a lot. They may say no to some of this too. And so, as we go through that process, there will likely be changes there. And then, we have a chance over 15 years to do amendments too. So if we get into a piece of the project and it, you know, for some reason doesn't feel right or doesn't look right at the end, we can adjust going forward.
Great.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Not, there is a motion.
Oh, I guess I should do that, because I should.
Move to approve and authorize the town manager to submit a comprehensive trail plan and sign permit applications for permit review, including but not limited to Act 250 wetlands and stream alteration review, following approval of the plan by the conservation easement holders on the property. Do I hear a second?
That's it.
My job. Do I have a second?
Second. I would like to second that.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so it's approved. Excellent,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we're gonna move on to our community project fund updates. Looks like we're gonna hear from Chief Collette, and do we need to call Matt back, or is he,
I just texted him.
you did, okay.
Planning Commission, so he'll be making his way over.
All right,
I can kind of just reset the discussion
Great.
if you'd like to.
Yep.
start. So the board's been reviewing priority projects from the Community Projects Fund over the last month and a half or so, and this is the last project for discussion is chatting about strategic future planning for the fire department, and then thinking about the concept of a public safety impact fee. So I've shared with the board just an overview memo in your packet, and then I'll give an introduction here, and then you'll hear from Chief Collette and Matt Belanger, our planning director, on the mechanics here, and then for questions, and then the board has time to start thinking about allocations for potential projects later on this agenda. Nothing required this evening, but that will wrap up your requested review of the projects on the list, so then be at your direction of where you want to go from here. So we get your map coming up, so let's start.
Okay.
It's here, so. So we talked about the a fire master plan and the public safety impact fee. Kind of this order of operations each of us will run through is this kind of continuum we designed here, thinking about if there's going to be a public safety impact fee. It dovetails with the planning component, but some things need to be tied into a capital component as well. So first is determining the desired and required level of service, and making the operational plan of how to get there and stay there as the town grows. Determine the capital needs to support the operational plan, and then determine what portion of the capital needs are due to new growth, then appropriate the new growth capital needs to predicted new development to create an impact fee structure. So as we kind of chunk this out, determine the level of service, the town's completed studies in the fire and police departments the last few years and looking at what those future needs of the town and public safety are. The Jim Baker study in the police department was finished last year, took a look at staffing moving into the next few years. I'm working on an implementation outline for that for the board to start discussing this fall. The AP Triton report for the fire department in 2021, that reviewed the capacity of the department to deliver services amid many demand pressures. That report proved as a report card for the town's risk assessment for fire service delivery and capacity. It led to that change of adding more full-time staff. This established the baseline and the ability for the town to deliver services, but it didn't create a master plan or work to assess the EMS service as part of that original scope of work for the AP Triton work that they partnered with the town on. So as we think about this, the operational planning component and thinking about dynamic service delivery for fire EMS into the future, thinking about what that looks like from a strategic planning component in the next 5 years and a master planning further from there. I'll turn to the fire chief to talk more about that.
Yeah, sure. So thank you again for having me. The strategic plan is something that I approached Manager Wells at shortly after my hiring, and then at that time it was really a collaborative discussion about we need to focus on staffing. That's why the AP Triton study came out first, because we were really kind of in crisis. So the department doesn't have a formal strategic plan that's been evolved in my tenure. So I'd like to really do that, and instead of it just coming out of my office where it's kind of a myopic view, I'd like it to involve both internal and external stakeholders. They'll let the community feedback about what the community wants to see in their fire department, what services they expect of their fire department, which would be included in that strat plan. And then internally for the employees of the fire department, for our firefighters to say, you know, what do we feel that we could deliver? What services maybe we can provide that we're not currently. How can we better serve the community with the talent that we have in our staff? And it gives us really a buy-in, a sense of ownership when we all collaborate on that. So it's not just your fire chief telling you what I expect the service is, but it's really inclusive of all of the community for the services that we provide. So that would be the hope with the strat plan. And then the master plan is to try to predict, to evolve some capital needs, where we're gonna be in the future. As the community grows, how does the fire department grow to meet those goals, objectives, and how do we finance that throughout? So to forecast ahead of time so we don't react and we are proactive in the approach as the community grows, that we actually have a roadmap. And obviously it'll have to alter a little bit as things evolve in a dynamic situation, but that roadmap would be beneficial for the fire department to have that master plan. So that's the hope, is that we create some sort, the strat plan up to about a 5-year strategic plan, but then this long-term and medium-term department master plan for the vision of the future, so we can match the operational needs of the organization and have the financing to support it.
Yeah, then, as Chief alluded to on the capital component, these operational needs and designing that for the future will have accompanying capital needs in both police and the fire department. As we think about police staffing, also, for example, additional police staffing, additional need for cruisers in the future as one component for that, additional fire staffing, radios, turnout gear, thinking about needs in physical space as well. So as we think about the idea of a public safety impact fee, as we work to think about operationally what the town may need in the future, and then capital-wise, what that would need to support those operations, a public safety impact fee has to be proportioned to what the newer growth and development's impact is to add those services. There'll certainly be, as the town looks at this and evolving what we're doing today, additional needs to support those components of a growing community and an aging community as well into the future. So as we talk about an idea of an impact fee, that's not going to be the revenue for everything that may be needed in the future, but it could be partial as we think about different tools for the town to consider. I'll turn it to Matt to talk more about those mechanics.
Sure. Eric's memo summarizes impact fees really well here, but the things to keep in mind are the two constitutional tests for impact fees, rough proportionality and a rational nexus. And what that means is when someone comes and develops something in your town, if you charge them an impact fee, it needs to be roughly proportional to the impact they're creating. In other words, the demand for new service that they're creating. And it needs to be a demand that they're actually creating. It needs to be something, when more people live in town, there are more calls for emergency services, or when a new retail store opens in town, there are more calls for those services. So the studies that are discussed in this memo, the first half is, well, what is that level of service that the town wants to provide? That's the master planning. And then what are the capital needs that are necessary to maintain that level of service as demand grows? The other side is, what is, over a reasonable time frame, often 20 or 25 years, what is the predicted growth? In other words, how are you matching the provision of those services and the development of those capital facilities with the rate of growth? So in a really simple example I'll give you, when South Burlington Police built the facility on Gregory Drive, they performed an impact fee study and said, we are going to spend this number of dollars to build and fit out this new facility. We need this new facility because of the new growth that's coming, and basically entirely. And we anticipate that this facility will take care of that demand for a period of 30 years, over which we expect this much growth. So now you have your factors. You have how much growth, you have how much it's going to cost you to build the things you need to provide the service, and you have a time frame you can divide that over. And this is how you arrive at a legally justifiable, under Vermont statute and constitutionally, fee per unit of development, whether that's per home or per square foot of new commercial, et cetera. And you say, this facility is gonna suit us, we think it's gonna cover us for this much development, we think that's gonna play out over this many years. And then you adjust and amend as you need to. But it really does work so much better when it's grounded in really solid strategic planning. And when you've actually looked and as Chief Collette said, gone out to the community and said, what is that level of service that the community is looking for? And ultimately, what is the level of service desired by the governing body? So, you know, if we keep the impact fee something that's roughly proportional to the impact the new development creates and related to the impacts it creates, you stay in the good graces of the state law. The fee comes in as part of permit fees. It trickles in over time. The last piece of it is you may have a study that justifies a relatively high fee that people feel for one reason or another is too high. And we've had that in Williston before. We've had studies that justified very high transportation impact fees without a lot of desire to go and adopt them. And then later we had another study that justified a high fee, and that select board did choose to adopt those fees. So, you know, it can capture some of your costs that are generated by new development. It might capture all of it. It will certainly help, not hurt.
I think that's our overview, so, questions from the board.
I have a question.
You feel that the impact fee that the town could potentially collect would pay for the study?
You may use under state law impact fees to perform studies. And there is a bit of a look back in impact fees where if you have to do work to arrive at the fee itself or make adjustments to it, you can use fee revenue to do that. The issue with a new fee like this is we don't have any fee revenue to spend right now. So I don't know that you can borrow against future revenue to do your studies.
I think about spending $55,000 to study why a bridge washed out. It's a lot of money to spend on studies.
That's honestly where I'm tripping over the $70,000 for the fire department. It's just a lot of money. It does say preliminary studies and surveys related to any physical betterment or improvement would be covered. So I would like to see that too. Matt, my question was a little bit different. I haven't seen yet, or if it even exists, like, what does the build out of our current town plan look like? Like, we have growth centers with infill that's possible. We have a limited number of parcels that could end up being housing development. That seems like it's all on North Williston Road, right? So are we talking about 8% more houses and 20% more retail? I mean, or more non-homestead or whatever? I'm interested in how much more growth we're trying to wrap our arms around. Do you have anything like that?
We've done build-out studies in the past. The big caution is that the zoned capacity of the land is always just like several orders of magnitude greater than what you're actually going to get. People don't generally build as dense as the zoning allows everywhere all at once.
Right.
Looking at trends in Williston, you know, we've used this Williston 2050 moniker for the town plan, and we've thought about, you know, look 35 years back, look 35 years forward. What do we think we're going to really see? I don't, you know, we're at about 10,100 people in Williston right now. I don't see by 2050 being much over 15,000. It sounds like a lot.
It sounds a lot, yeah.
You know,
It sounds like more than I would have guessed, yeah.
But there's an awful lot of stars that would have to align for that to happen. And remember, the easiest land is always getting built on, and the hardest land to build on is always what's left. And eventually you get into, you know, redevelopment, which is even harder and slower. So, you know, we have zoning capacity in the growth center alone with our form-based code for 4,000 dwelling units, which would be, you know, 8,000 more people. But that's a really theoretical maximum. That won't happen by 2050 or maybe ever. So, you know, when we're thinking about tying to something like an impact fee, you know, you might set a fee with a schedule that runs out 20 years, maybe 25. You're probably not going to find anybody who wants to predict much further out into the future than that. So, yes, we've looked at build out. The world of retail is changing. The
Right.
world of hospitality is changing.
Office space is changing.
Office space has,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
changed significantly, and all of those things can kind of play into those predictions. The world of what kind of calls come for emergency services changed, you know, and so I think you can try to kind of wrap your arms around all of that, but you do have to look at it from all of those different ways to try to come up with something reasonable. But roughly, you know, I think we can predict a reasonable growth pattern over the life of a fee like this and say this is about what we're going to get. You know, just by way of example, the transportation impact fee and I think the updated recreation impact fee were both based on just a presumption out of growth management. Well, here's how many the town allows every year, because we had a system where every single dwelling unit went through growth management. And that was 80 dwelling units a year. But permit-wise, the average over the last 20 years of growth management's been around 57, 68, something like that. So it's underperformed. We don't always know. We don't know what the economy will do. But I would caution against just taking the base, you know, units per acre or square feet per acre and dividing, because that just doesn't seem to be the way it ever plays out.
So say that we do a bunch, or we decide at some point that we want to assume a 25% growth over 20 years, right? Something like that. So especially for fire, which we have the study that says this is, if I understand right, the Trident or whatever you called it, the last study we did for the fire department got us to a level of what we need now. So wouldn't anything above that be due to growth? I keep asking why we need another study, and I keep getting the answer that
No,
the study that was done was to get us to where we are now.
I'm just thinking back to a little bit with that. You know, that kind of brought us up to an immediate amount, but there were a number of other recommendations that we weren't able to implement with staffing, especially on the fire suppression end of things. And we didn't look, you know, we looked at the fire risk there, but we didn't build a lot into the EMS component as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chief.
No, you're right on.
Because the majority of our calls are still EMS based, and they're going to continue to see more
Right.
EMS based. So we've done things the last couple of years. We've kept the third ambulance. We've tried to evolve staffing to have, when that second medical call comes in, to run the second ambulance out. But we haven't looked closely on what that evolving need is going to be as well, and also for a community that has different demographics in the population with different medical needs moving ahead, what that means in the future. So that gave us a good baseline, the select board a good baseline at the time of this issue we were having with just base staffing demand, but it didn't give us the picture moving forward where we need to be more proactive than reactive, I will say.
There were a number of recommendations for additional positions for fire prevention, inspections, and such like that we just don't have the capacity right now to fill.
So I think what I was getting at is, well, first of all, I'm not even sure what capital we're talking about, because I think it's more like positions that we're talking about. But if there were capital, it would not be, the impact fees are not going to pay for it. They're going to pay for a small part if it's only 25% or something. You're not going to be able to make the argument that a new substation for emergency vehicles is being driven by growth.
I guess it would, guess, I can't speak directly to
Yeah.
that now until we study it more, but,
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of what South Burlington looked at with the police station
Right.
model there. But I think if there's a level of staffing, you know, for example, there's 8 bunk rooms in the station today, we have shifts of 7. The 8th room, we like to have a call staff member if they're on shift, able to be there. So if we look to evolve our shift size any further, there's just a capacity for a dorm room component. And then as we think about that, you know, as hypothetically, is growing that physical space in that station the best approach? Or should we look at some type of satellite station and think about the policing needs as well? Those are all, you know, big capital decisions for infrastructure for the town to make, and understanding what that demand curve is gonna look like in the future years, especially on the EMS side. I think that will really drive a lot of where those decisions have to be made.
I guess I'm just uncomfortable with $100,000 study when we don't even know where we're going. I mean, it just seems like an awful lot of money,
Yeah, I agree, it's a lot of money. But I think, you know, we're advocating for to help create that plan of where we're going. Operationally, the town spends a few $1 million a year on public safety and trying to think, how do we need to evolve those service needs in the future? But, yeah, I won't
But the fact
disagree,
is, you
that's
wouldn't
a
put this
good
in the
amount of
budget.
money.
We're only doing this because you have ARPA money to do it. You wouldn't put a $100,000 study in the budget, I suspect.
Maybe more over a couple budget cycles to save up for it.
One of the things, like, in my head, the way I've wrapped my kind of head around this is the AP Triton study was to meet the capacity for all the growth that had happened that we hadn't met previously. So that, you know, that was to get us up to a baseline of to address, like, just you know, just our current need and levels of service. And as Chief has mentioned, you know, there was, and Terry can attest, there was a lot of recommendations in there. You know, that 9 was, I think the bigger recommendation was like 15, you know, new.
The entire document, I believe, had 26.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge number, and 9 is kind of, we were like, okay, like, what can we
Like the police department study,
reasonably,
double it.
yeah, what can we reasonably absorb right now just to get us up to kind of the minimum recommended level of service? Since I in my mind, I envision the master plan is, and what's next? You know, what's, you know, that if that was meeting us where we were at, you know, and it kind of stopped at that point and envisioning that this is, the, you know, the 2050 plan for the fire department, you know, what's going to be next, and that wasn't really looked at because there was such an immediate need to address, you know, our just the growth that hadn't happened over so many years prior to that.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But we're also only gonna grab, over the next 20 years, grow 20 to 25%. Do we need to spend $70,000 to figure out how to do that?
I might add that I don't think at any point the AP Triton study really asked, to Manager Wells' point, about what the public expectation of how long they should wait for an ambulance to show up at their house. You know, do you want the ambulance to be there in 4 minutes? Do you want the ambulance to be there in 8 minutes?
But Chief, don't you think that everyone's gonna say, I want it there the minute I hang up from my 911 call? No one's gonna say,
I
8
think
minutes
we-
is good if I'm having a heart attack.
I
No
think
one's
we
gonna
have to be
say
honest with them, though. If we can't meet the demand for service, we have to forecast that.
that. Right, which is exactly what I'm a little bit afraid of, is that everyone's gonna say, I want it in 30 seconds, and next thing we know, we're gonna have a 70-person fire department on top of our 50-person police department. You know, I mean, we're not that big a town. We need to figure out how we're gonna live within our budget. And sometimes when we keep spending all this money on studies that consultants love, they're gonna give you what you want. It's always about growth. It's always about growing your systems. They're not gonna say like, well, I think you could do it with a few fewer people. They're all about growth, and it feels like it ties my hands because now I have, but we have the study that says that we need to double the size of the fire department. And I'm worried about being able to fund everything we want in this town.
Right now, our property taxes are 85% education,
Yeah, but that's, yeah.
right? 15% is municipal, and 75% of the municipal is labor.
Oh, labor.
Labor, right? So that means less than 5% of the total budget goes to providing public services.
No,
Well, the labor is
Labor is
providing a public service.
Well, I mean, you know, like the roads,
Oh.
you know, the infrastructure. So we're gonna, you know, I mean, I think that's, we're pretty, not much of the town taxes are really going to the roads and the bridges and the public works, you know, the projects that we need to have done, like this bridge the pedestrian bridge.
oh, you're saying it should be, if
You know,
if property taxes are going up, more should be shifting there rather than more labor? Is that what you're?
well, you know, I mean, I'm kind of I'm agreeing with you, you know, I mean, is we could be spending all of our, out of the property taxes, we're only 15% is going to the municipality and 75% of that is going to labor. I mean, that's a high percentage of just what the town spends on just labor.
I think most of the labor is pretty important though, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but, you know, I mean.
I just
but-
don't want it to double.
Right, right, so
Yeah.
we don't wanna see, you know,
Yeah.
that turn down to, you know,
Yeah.
3%
True.
for public infrastructure,
Yeah.
2% public infrastructure. We have to have a limit somewhere on how much we spend on everything that we're spending on in the town.
So this is kind of bringing us into our next item, which is the community project funds, kind of discussion. So if there's other questions for Chief or for, Matt right now, certainly, would have you ask them. Otherwise, we can move on to the next item and talk about the larger picture of the community project funds.
Yeah, I guess I'm just gonna, I got into the prior studies, it's a lot of, I mean, well, first of all, it said really important things like, yeah, your response time depends on where your fire station is. It's like, wow, how much do we pay for this? But there was a lot of good data in there, and I'm just really curious if there's any way we could use that data as a first pass. Or maybe what I'm asking is that should these be two separate things? Because should we decide if we need a $70,000 study on the fire department versus 30? I kind of voted yes on it when we listed these because I'm interested in the public safety impact fee. But I'm starting to feel less confident that even that's a good use of money, given that it's very limited on what it can be used for. If we're not intending to build a new public safety building 2 miles from the firehouse, then is there enough capital need to do that or not? I guess I would just kind
Well,
of
a
think
new
about
fire
it.
truck's 1.3 million, a new ambulance is a $500,000.
There would have to be additional ones, though, for us to use this money for them. You'd have to
So-
add another fire, so, yeah. We'd have to have 3 ambulances, as opposed to 2.
Well, our level of service right now, we look to have that second ambulance staff if we have a concurrent call, but we don't have a minimum, we're always gonna staff 2 ambulances model. So I think if we got in that staffing level, that changes the needs, where we're gonna make sure we always have 2 ambulance staff at a minimum.
But I think what I'm saying is that, so right now we have 2 ambulances staffed, and then we have a third one as a backup, right? Is that?
No, we
Okay,
have
well,
1 ambulance staff.
okay, 1 ambulance staffed. But we kind of know we need 2, right? That's,
The demand for service.
says 2,
That's-
right?
yeah.
So if you were to say, like, we're gonna have 25% more people in town, okay, now we're gonna need 3 ambulances. And so we could buy the 3rd ambulance, potentially, with impact fees.
Yeah.
But you couldn't replace one of the first 2 with impact fees, because that's not
Yeah,
driven by growth, that's driven by current need.
Yeah, we'd have to look at that, how that demand nexus plays into it.
Right, right. Same with the fire, you'd have to be able to say, I need another fire truck because of the growth, in order to use the impact fees for another fire truck. And someplace to park it. Yeah. Okay, I think I need to figure out what's gonna move me off of this, skepticism on spending $100,000 on this project, and I'm not exactly sure I can articulate what I'm looking for, so I'll give it a little bit more thought before we actually get around to.
Well, I think it's important to note that we've already decided to allocate, right? We had already previously voted to allocate the money to the fire strategic plan.
Yeah, that was on the list back in
Yeah.
July, where that was a project, where there was consensus of the board to advance the project, but there wasn't
Yeah.
a budget number attached to it.
Right, so
Yep.
if you want to do it for 30,000, I'm all in. If you want to do it for 100,000, maybe not.
I think
So-
part of this too, we try to come up with that 70,000 number based on what we thought it may be. We haven't put this out to bid yet, so certainly we wouldn't know that exact number until we got bids to review and a scope of work to review. I'll say, in my mind, we can't do the impact fee study until we figure out operationally where things are gonna go, because that's gonna blend into the capital needs that the impact fees are based off of.
So we would have to commit to a public safety building, for example, before we could assess the impact fees.
Yeah, we have to draw some nexus, based on that, operational demand, whether it's a building, whether it's, additional ambulance, whether it's additional staffing needs and equipment to that staffing, and thinking about the policing component of that as well, not just the
Right.
fire EMS,
Right.
the policing component looks at too. Additional needs for patrol coverage, additionally, you need additional cruisers to cover that. Nexus to draw to, public safety hub in the growth center, things of that nature as well.
Which is sort of why I started with how big do we think we're going to get? Because if we're thinking about a 10% growth, that's different than if we're thinking about 50% growth, so.
Yeah, but part of it with the residential component and then the commercial component as well, and what those other calls driven by not just the resident population, but by the population that comes into town during the day, traveling on busy intersections and routes, and that's all. As we think about the impact of, I think about the commercial component where it's creating additional vehicle trips, is there a nexus to that as well for maybe increased demand for public safety as well? You have larger buildings that might have more vulnerabilities, more of a response need on the fire side. That creates more of a need and an impact from that specific type of use in the future. I know as our department looks at some of these buildings and looks at some of the vulnerabilities and thinking about what they need at a staffing level to respond to that building, continues to evolve based on that future planning and growth, and the redevelopment's part of that as well. So I don't have specifics I can say. I'm just trying to paint a picture of different
Yeah, I
elements
still
here
think we need to
think
start with
about.
how much we're going to grow.
Well, I'd also submit that, the document could have areas of improvement which generate revenue, right? And so, without knowing what that potential is, without exploring that could be part of that strategic plan. Do we have a need for inspections, rental housing inspections like you're seeing next door? Like, there may be things out there that would help offset some of that. So there's another component to that. It's not always the draw.
I'm worried about 23 million people living in Florida. They're all good.
We're
Mass
23 people.
exodus north.
Moving all to Vermont. Okay, I might also, Eric, Chief had attached some articles about why we need a strategic plan, but I'd be kind of interested in actually seeing a couple of strategic plans to see what they look like, if we could find some in relatively similar size places.
Yeah, I'm sure we could find some samples out there.
No problem.
All right. Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's gonna bring us into discussion about again, the larger scope of the community project fund projects. It's still a mouthful for me to say, I just wanna call it ARPA.
Double projects.
I talked with Eric, we obviously are missing Ted today, and given that there's some kind of bigger scope questions, it was going to be my suggestion that we potentially consider a motion for the Industrial Avenue pedestrian bridge project and kind of table the discussion of the other items until Ted is here, especially because there are some now greater questions about, some of the previous ones that we've talked about, but obviously open to all of your feedback on that.
Makes sense to me. Certainly, we don't want to go forward with allocating funds without having a full board here. I think the most critical problem we have at this point is the bridge.
Yeah.
My bridge?
Well, and there is a time sensitivity
Terry's
towards
bridge.
ordering the, you know, the sooner we order that, the sooner it can be installed, and it is a significant lag time right now,
I
so.
thought we had this penciled in for 500. I know it was a 690 project, but I didn't know we had the 690 penciled in on the total. Because we replaced it, was for 500 for the project that he replaced this with, the culverts.
Yeah, that was the number he got from,
I mean, I know this is a
Local
project
engineering.
cost. I guess I was assuming that 500 was coming from this bucket and he would find the rest of it in his budget somewhere.
no, we don't have that available in Public Works capital.
Well, something else would have to move, but
Yeah.
yeah, you'd have to, I mean, if we didn't have ARPA money, you'd figure out how to fix the bridge, so. Because I was like, oh, we're so close, and I said, wait a minute, if that was 500, we'd be able to do all these things on the
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, and I didn't include the 210 in that bottom line. That would be from the sewer fund net position.
Yes, right, yeah, I checked, I added them up.
There's a couple of things missing from this chart that you gave us, and that was on the original chart, the Allen Brook Bridge repair and the Town Hall parking lot solar canopy were on the original list of 8.
The Allen Brook one, that's built into the
County parks.
country parks.
Oh, you did,
parks
okay.
number. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I should call that out from their memo.
And to Mike's point, I think it also included that study for a different bridge, right?
The solar car?
No, a solar cover, I think we decided that we would wait on.
Yeah.
did? Oh, yeah, you're right, we did, yeah,
This was, yes, there's a study to determine
yes,
if there's a better way to,
right,
Yeah.
Future needs
Yeah.
for that
Yes.
crossing.
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I can, yeah, we had those updated memos in your last packet. That's where I pulled that from. But if it's helpful, I can update this in a little more detail too, for like a one-pager, if that's helpful,
Yeah.
or recollate those documents for you as well.
And since I'm already being a bad guy today, I just want to throw out a question. How do people feel? So the brick church fire suppression was voted no by 55% of the people in town. And yet, we're gonna use this money for the exact same project. I'm feeling like it's an important project, but it feels a little bit like we said no, and you're doing it anyway. And then,
So we did the same thing with the parking lot. They said no, and we're gonna do it.
but we took it down, they're voting on
We're
it though,
we're
right?
putting it back on,
There has to be voted on, we're not voting on
because
this.
we're not using this kind of money for that.
Right.
We're using part of this money for.
Right, so it's a
for-
different situation.
Yeah.
I mean, if people vote no on the parking lot, then that is a different situation. This is lifted from a no vote to here.
But if you look at the results of the elections back at town meeting time, people just voted no forever, essentially, and it cost money, except the original budget that we had. Well, they voted against that too.
So maybe we should save the 400,000 for a rainy day fund for something that comes up?
I guess I was thinking more like, is there room for this to be more like a match with fundraising, or some way to get some, did the community really mean no, or are we just assuming they didn't really mean no?
You did
This,
make-
we don't have to have an answer tonight, it was just something that really struck me. It's like, if I really voted no, fully knowing that I did not support the town spending $400,000 on a fire suppression bill for that building, and then the select board goes around and just says, well, I just found out the money, we'll use that, would that seem like I was heard, my vote was heard or mattered? And I was just kind of,
I
They
agree with
voted
you, Gene.
no on the whole
wow,
budget.
I thought you'd bite me.
No, I
They
agree.
voted no on the whole budget as well, and then we came back and said, well,
Right,
we'll
but they
cut
got
it,
another
we'll cut
vote
it
on
by
it. They will never get another vote on this, we're just doing it without a vote.
Well, and I think when we first started talking about ARPA funds, we said we would like to do things that we would not do otherwise. And we use this money for doing things that we would not ask the town to support. And that's why I'm supporting of the Brick Church fire suppression.
I guess I'd be with you if we hadn't voted, hadn't asked, and they'd said no.
You know, if the town had voted yes for everything else except this, I would say, forget it, indeed, but essentially the town voted no for everything.
I just, you know, it's a beautiful building, it's part of our history, I wouldn't want to see it wrecked, but it's very lightly used, and I could see people saying you couldn't build a park that my kids could use in, you know, closer to where I live. It was just a thought that came to my mind that I'm a little, that was one of, we didn't really come back around and have somebody come in to talk about it because it's been sitting there for a long time.
We've had discussions,
Right,
a lot of
yeah.
discussions about this particular project in, you know, creating a bond, vote and so forth, so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you had mentioned possibly just refining the list and getting some more detail about the projects again for us. So I think that would be beneficial to do. Do we feel comfortable moving forward with a motion in terms of the Industrial Avenue Bridge today? And then tabling any decisions on the other items?
I'd be comfortable with 500, approving 500 for it. Because I think that if we approve the whole thing, something else has to come off. I don't know that we've had that conversation yet. So
Yeah.
I'd be comfortable, I mean, you know you're gonna find it if you need it, right? If you need the rest of the money.
Well, I guess I would say we wouldn't order it until we knew we had all the funds, so whether, you know, we approve 500 today, and, you know, I don't have.
I think you would,
I
Eric.
don't have.
I think you would find $190,000 in your $15 million budget to do this.
We
We would take it out of fund balance or something, right? I mean, this is an emergency. Aren't you looking to get some other money anyway?
It's unlikely for this project from what we're received from the state. I think it's part of a larger discussion on, you know, where the fund balance is too, whether you want to use this or fund balance for it. I wouldn't be able to approve a purchase for it until we had all the money allocated. So if the board approves 500,000 today, you know, I would be holding before approving it till we knew where the rest of the money was coming from anyway.
I guess in that case, I'm uncomfortable approving it until I know which other things are coming off the list. I hate to do that because I want to get the thing ordered, but,
Mike or?
Kind of a public safety problem. That bridge is a pedestrian bridge.
yeah,
Well, it's the whole thing. It's a pedestrian bridge as well as the rest of the bridge.
the sewer part thing, is it?
Well, so the options are to make a motion and see if, you know, we approve this time, or we can, table it, and, you know, we could ask Eric to look into possible other, you know, what it would mean for our, well, Eric and, you as well, obviously, to look into what it would mean, you know, surely for, using our, you know, other sources, of revenue or other sources of, you know. Is that the consensus then?
As far as the island, like, I'm going backwards
Wait,
here.
no, we're just talking about the Industrial Avenue Bridge.
I know.
We'll come back. Could we, well, I guess what you're saying, Eric, is you'd have to come back and ask us for the other 190 once you figure out where it's gonna come from.
Yeah, and I, you know, looked at Shirley too. I don't think we have that type of variance in our operating budget, you know, this
It would
early in
be
the year especially.
Fund balance would be pretty much the only.
Couldn't reallocate something from the capital fund?
It's very tight as it is after we had to reduce things.
So what would you have done if there was no ARPA money? We just wouldn't fix the bridge?
We might have to look at borrowing money at that point. Or, yeah, continue to look into where the capital plan is, looking at the fund balance. You know, it's fortunate that this came up with this pool of money as an option, but if If not, we'd have to look at all those on the table, maybe different proportions for each.
I guess the only other thing I can think of is, we are getting another paving grant. Bruce has historically, used those paving grants to then pave more.
Mhm.
We could say we're not gonna pave more, and we're gonna use $190,000 on the paving grant, because that's what paving already done. So, we already have that expense, so we could say, we'll charge $190,000 as the operating budget, and the paving grant is the source of funds for it.
And that's, I'm assuming that's allowable.
Use it for, money's fungible. It's just money.
Well, I mean, we'd have to transfer into the capital fund too with that, if that was a capital project.
All right, so then it sounds like maybe there is a little bit of investigation to do, so maybe we will,
If you, yeah, it sounds like you want us to kind of look at a couple options.
yeah.
You know, all community projects fund, then maybe a combination of, if we can see anything in the operating or capital budgets. So,
And what that would mean, and
Short-term
maybe just look into what that would mean for fund balance too, and where that would, what position that would put us into for fund balance if that was the other option.
So then, like, at our next meeting, if really, then we could say, okay, well, we'd rather, it's gonna have to be 690, we won't do the brick church, or we won't do the county parks, or
Right,
something.
I think we'll have to then, yeah. I mean, I think that's what we had envisioned anyway.
Yeah,
at this
that's
point,
right,
saying,
yeah.
like, the money's going somewhere. Again, you know, other than the bridge, I think it would behoove us to wait for Ted, but to wait for, you know, all of that, and for Shirley and Eric to come up with these numbers. But maybe for next meeting, we come with if there's time on the agenda, hopefully.
Yeah, let us look at
Okay.
the scenarios, because I know Shirley's still working, she's closing out last fiscal year as well. So let us, we'll take a look at it and see. You know, the grand scheme of things is gonna be 6 months to order it, so if it's 2 weeks later,
Yep.
3 weeks later, it's.
Really close to the next fiscal year.
So yes,
Okay,
yes.
now you can ask your question
Yeah.
about Allenbrook.
I was gonna say, but for all of us, I think the benefit would be to really come into the next meeting with our priorities and, you know.
Right.
I was just thinking with the Allenbrook Bridge, if we, you know, that's gonna go out to bid, correct? When the job is approved?
Yeah, we would likely, there's the company that put it together for us. They're very specialized in the work. It's likely a sole source to them, I anticipate, from our conversations to date with them.
That's the actual construction of it, right?
Yeah,
Right, I was just wondering if we put it out to bid, we had a couple of different companies give us, you know.
I feel like the last time that this was the company, the last time they had to build it, right? Like, this was the only company who was able to do it, so.
yeah.
Last company that built it, it only lasted a year.
Well, that was
Yeah, they didn't engineer.
unprecedented environmental impacts.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing with the Village Park Pavilion. We don't know what that's really gonna cost either, so.
No,
you know, there's-
We got a good number on that.
Oh, good, okay.
That's 110,000.
Oh, good, okay,
Yeah, Todd got that confirmed.
good.
All right, so we will move on to,
Okay, we'll get those.
yeah, thank you, Eric. And Shirley. I just feel bad giving you guys more homework, but. So the next item is the health insurance plan for 2025.
So it's the time of year where we need to select a health insurance plan for staff for next year. We're recommending changing our carrier to MVP Healthcare from Blue Cross Blue Shield. We work with our health insurance broker every year to look at options, and followed the news, Blue Cross Blue Shield had a over 22% average increase. MVP was about half of that. So we costed out the plans. We switched to Blue Cross a couple years ago from MVP. We feel this year, we're recommending a change again due to the volume of cost here. It's about $140,000 less if we change carriers to the comparable plan with MVP Healthcare. Our current estimate is just over $1.6 million for healthcare in FY26 with the MVP plan. If we stayed with the current plan, it'd be estimated at $1.77 million. Our FY25 budget amount for health insurance, including our opt-out payments to staff, is about $1.5 million. looking at another way, the increase in cost with the MVP plan is $110,000 versus $250,000 if the town remained with Blue Cross Blue Shield. So we feel as a fiduciary recommendation to look at changing the carrier for next year.
Even I can't think of a way to argue that.
Yeah.
Big number.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom that, you know, spending an additional $110,000 is actually saving $140,000, but that is the bottom line, so. So any other questions or comments? If not, there's a motion.
Move to offer the MVP Vermont Plus Plan, non-standard, silver CDHP reflected plan to town staff for health insurance coverage in calendar year 2025.
There's a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. That brings us to the manager's report.
A couple just brief things I'll highlight from my written report. Discussion at the last meeting about a public forum with the F-35s. I reached out to the Air Force. I got a note back today that they were discussing and they'd be in touch with to chat more about it. So I had a brief call with the airport director. I have a meeting with them Friday, somewhat related, but you know, they certainly be interested in being part of that community dialogue as well. So we'll see if we can get that to take shape early in 2025.
I'm sorry, they do or do not want to be part of it?
The airport?
Yes,
Yep,
Air
yep.
Force.
The director was interested in being part to answer questions from the public. The Air Force, they acknowledged my request and they're going to get back to me further on discussing it. So I'll get more information. I'll have a call with them to talk more about it.
Thank you.
Then just to circle back on the library project, the design committee was meeting this evening to discuss the feedback received with from the trustees, the public, the town band. We had a good discussion with representative from the town band earlier this week to help that discussion. We also met with the school district earlier today to talk about some design elements there as well. So all those were good productive conversations. So we'll wait for the committee's design work to continue and then the estimating part of that to really get an idea what the scope and cost of that project will be at this point.
Have they come back with some new designs, or they're just still talking to people about it?
Still talking. I think mainly thinking about the configuration of a lot of the feedback from the town band was where the band performance would be. So they're open to moving the bandstand. So I think they're thinking about what that could look like with relocating that as part of the scope and where the band could play, and also kind of thinking as like a performing arts type of facility as well to have other uses besides just music concerts. So I think that project's advancing well, and hope to have an update to the board. If not later this year, early next year. We just have to wait until we get the estimate, and we're gonna hinge on getting the design work.
Okay.
That's all I have in the manager's report. Not a long list.
Any other business?
We have one thing that will fall under your duties as a liquor board and local tobacco board. You may have heard in the news that Jolly has stole to Stewart's. There is a Jolly in town at the Taft Corners intersection. If you'd like to consider granting a second-class license to Stewart Shops Corp. and a tobacco endorsement to Stewart Shops Corp. for that location.
Is that what they have now? Is that what Jolly has now?
Yeah.
Transfer of the licenses to the new,
New ownership.
yeah. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
A second?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. And that brings us to final thoughts on agenda items.
I think I've talked myself out.
Okay. All right. Well, if there is no final thoughts, I will declare us adjourned.
All right, here's the gavel.
Efficient, right?
Yeah.